Hello everyone, it's Helen at Journaling Planet, and today I'm going to show you how I transformed an old notebook my auntie was going to throw away into a rather beautiful seasonal scrapbook. Now, I know that the definitions of what's a glue book, what's a scrapbook, what's a junk journal, etc. is a bit of a thorny issue on YouTube, and I'm not totally certain exactly how I'm going to use this book yet. It may end up as being more of a glue book than anything else. But what I wanted was the freedom to be able to say, well, I might glue things into it, I might draw in it, I might write in it. So I wanted complete freedom, and that's why I've called it a scrapbook. And the first thing that I did was set about covering the kind of old blue cover that still had the price on it. And one of the reasons for doing this project is to use up the ephemera that has been hanging around in my craft room, because guess what? It's too beautiful to be used, and I want just the perfect project, etc., etc. And I'm just getting a bit tired of myself making these same excuses for not using up the things that I have and kind of hoarding. So there's a few projects that I've set up recently to try and counteract this. And one of them is my magazine-only glue book. And that's actually where the idea for this came from, because I did an autumn spread a couple of videos back and really enjoyed doing that in my magazine-only glue book. I was really pleased with the finished result. And it made me realize how much the seasons really inspire me in my crafting, and how it would just make sense to have a space where I could just essentially meditate on the seasons and create art and stick things in that were just about the seasons and nothing else. Starting with autumn, because that happens to be the season in which I'm starting this scrapbook. So that's where the idea came from. And as soon as I had the idea, I thought, it's really going to help me to start using up these papers and other ephemera that I've got sitting around, some of which I've made, by hand, like original art. And it's sitting in my ephemera box, looking at me, judging me for not having used it. These papers that I'm making a little border with now, they must have sat in my stash for a good 2 years. And as much as they're beautiful, and as much as ripping them up kind of hurts me on some level, they're supposed to be there to be used. So what I can tell you is, although it was a bit of a struggle at first to use these pieces of paper, by the end of making this scrapbook, or should I say setting it up, I'm sort of really just altering a notebook, aren't I? But, in the process of setting it up, I actually ended up feeling so good about this process. And not because the finished result ended up perfect, but because I had used up so much stuff and I liked the look of the finished result. Not perfect, as I say, and I will talk about the things that I would do differently if, say, I fill this one up and I start another one at some point in the future. But to me, the finished result looks lovely and I'm happy with it. And it looks nothing like the very plain, kind of almost composition book-esque notebook that my auntie was just going to get rid of. It looks like a beautiful thing that I've put my own personal touch on. And I have to say, I do absolutely love doctoring notebooks and making them kind of personal, because there's just something so satisfying about knowing that I've got something unique that I can work in and enjoy, and that I kind of altered it to my own design. It's really a lovely feeling. So there's a mix of ephemera being used here. The print that's on the front there, I found it in a second-hand shop. Really beautiful reproduction of some lovely fruit images. And plums are an autumn fruit, so I decided to go with those. And in terms of the apples that I'm cutting out, it is a book of 100 pages of craft and writing paper that are all fruit designs. And I have a mushroom one as well. And these are things that I got for my last birthday. So my next birthday is in about a month. So again, these things have sat in my stash for a whole year because altogether now they're too beautiful to use. And I just got to the point with this scrapbook where I was like, I know I've got a bunch of ephemera that is all about the seasons, that is all about autumn, winter, spring, summer, and it's sitting there and I know that I'm sitting there going, it's too beautiful, I can't use it. Well, now is the time. It's game over for things sitting in my stash and being hoarded because I'm just not willing to do it anymore. I really want to use these things. That is the point of getting them in the first place. So having put the cover in place, I decided I was going to stamp the words seasonal scrapbook on the front. But being not the best stamper in the world when it comes to getting all the letters straight, I decided to do that on a piece of scrap card first and get it how I wanted it. And then I could just tear around that, ink it and stick it to the front cover. And if I had to do that 4 or 5 times to get it right, then that's what I would do. But luckily, somehow while I was filming this, I did some of the best stamping that I've ever done in my entire life. Usually I would not get something that straight and that perfectly printed the first time. So I was pleased about that. However, one thing that I will just flag, because I had to think about this, and this is exactly the kind of thing that can trip me up. It's a very small, silly thing. Probably the rest of you don't have a problem with this at all and totally get it, how it needs to be. But I had to think hard about the fact that, oh yes, I need to spell it backwards because when I press it down to the piece of paper, it will be reversed. So you can see in the video that I put all the letters in essentially a backwards order to make sure that they show the right way up when they're stamped. If I'm not explaining this very well and you're thinking, why on earth would anyone put the letters on backwards? Just do a test yourself with some letters and you'll see exactly what I mean. If you spell the word the right way to you and then you place it down, it'll turn up backwards on the piece of paper because you flip the little acrylic block over in order to stamp it. So everything has to be backwards. And of course, me being me, I had to sort of think about that before I did it. I had to remind myself, now remember, all of the letters have to run backwards for it to appear the right way. It's a silly little thing. It has tripped me up before. I tend to just find it very entertaining when something ends up being printed backwards. I can still use that piece of paper for scrap or, collage. But the point is I'm trying to get the letters the right way. So I just thought I would flag that. So already the front is looking rather lovely. And my intention with this book was to cover the entire cover of the notebook, including the insides, and then have essentially 4 dividers, 1 for autumn, 1 for winter, 1 for spring, and 1 for summer. So I used this craft card that I got from a thrift store. Couldn't believe it when I found this card in the thrift store. It was, there's probably about 100 sheets of it and they wanted £1. And it's just the most gorgeous cream colour and it's really sturdy. So it's perfect for just so many projects. And yet again, of course, I barely used any of it. So for this project, I was like, well, I can use 4 sheets of that lovely card, or at least a few sheets of it. And that's an immediate win, again, in terms of using things that have been sitting in my stash for a while. Decided that I would use these lovely apples on the autumn divider page, glued down some napkin, just using my glue stick. I decided not to start getting into wet glue. Arguably it would have looked better if I had, but honestly, this project, like making the cover and the dividers for this book, it took me about 90 minutes. If I'd started getting into waiting for glue to dry, waiting for paint to dry, it would have really tipped it into a much longer project. And I didn't want that today. I just wanted to get on and get a project finished. So these are the choices we make. I still think the napkin looks gorgeous. And on top of that napkin is just some torn book page. I found that book page is working really well with the autumn colours. So when I create my spreads, I'll probably include either book page or some brown paper because I think it's a great neutral complement to the autumn colours. Again, those apples were cut out of that craft paper about fruit book. And ultimately, I will go around those with my black Inktense pencil. But for now, I'm just getting the autumn label stamped out. And again, remembering to go backwards so that it appears the right way. As well as the little labels that I glue down to the divider pages, I also decide to create tabs on the side. And of course, not really thinking things through, I put all of the letters for autumn away and then realised that I need to get them all back out again because I want to create a tab. So a little bit of thinking through can save you time with these projects. Sometimes I think I'm just so engrossed in what I'm doing that I'm not always thinking about the next 3 steps. I'm just thinking about the step I'm doing now. And to make my tabs, I just got a piece of the cream card that I said that I found in the thrift store and folded it in half. As you can see, had to pull out the letters for autumn again because I'd put them away. I was so annoyed with myself about that and started stamping them. If you're wondering why I'm only stamping a few letters at a time, it's because I only have one of each letter in the set. And so obviously I can only go so far before I have to take it off again, all the letters that are on there, and rearrange them so that I can reuse the U in this case. I then cut down with my X-Acto knife and cut the corners off the tab, ink around, and in fact also I inked over it as well to give it a little bit more colour, a little bit more of autumn colours, and just generally make it stand out a bit more. And then I just glued it into place. Now, one of the things that is slightly annoying about the finished result, although it is only a very small annoyance, and I shouldn't be such a perfectionist really, because this is a handmade, alteration to this book. At the end of the day, I'm doing this all by hand, so there's going to be some error. But ultimately, the thing that annoys me is that the end tab for summer doesn't quite have enough room. So when the booklet lies flat at the end, you'll see that you can read all of the other seasons perfectly, but summer, like the S, is kind of obscured. And what's slightly annoying about that is that there was room to scooch that autumn tab up a little bit. But of course, being me, I hate measuring. So I didn't measure, and at the end there was not quite enough room for the summer tab. But you know what? It's fine. It all looked fine, and you will see in the finished result, there's probably only me who even really notices that. But it's just one of those things that next time I will sort of measure where each tab needs to go and make sure that it's definitely within those parameters. In order to find the places for the tabs and for the dividers, I simply opened the book in the middle, and I knew that would be where spring would sit. And then I roughly gauged about a quarter of the way through and 3/4 of the way through the book for the winter and summer divider pages. I could have gone through and painstakingly counted the pages to make sure that they were all even. But to be honest, that's a little bit fruitless anyway for me, because I know it will take me much longer to fill the summer pages than it will anything else, because in the summer I tend to be out, I tend to be with family, I don't tend to be in the craft room. Whereas in autumn and winter and spring, I tend to be indoors more because it's colder here, and thus I will get more crafting done, which means I'll fill up those scrapbook pages a lot quicker. So if summer is a little bit smaller than the rest, which is what I tried to do, then it's no big deal. I didn't really need to go through and painstakingly count the pages. I think there can come a point where you manage to take some of the enjoyment out of a project for yourself. And that's a shame when that happens. Again, these other prints that I'm using as divider pages, they just are prints that I found in secondhand shops. They did not cost me a lot of money at all, but they have been sitting around. I did end up trimming a little bit off this print because I felt that dividing page was just sticking out a little bit too far in the book from my liking. And So I went down with my X-Acto knife. And what I love about that is when you get a project like this, say you have got a page that's sticking out too far, you can just get your X-Acto knife to it and a ruler and it's all sorted out. And what I love about this kind of project is that most issues are fixable. As you see at the end, the tab issue is not really fixable without a lot of work. I would have had to pull all the other tabs off, and I really wouldn't have wanted to do that. I would have then had to make smaller tabs. Again, I didn't want to go back and do that. So I guess you have to gauge for yourself how much something is going to annoy you if you slightly misjudge it, and whether or not it's worth the effort of going back and doing all that again. I just love, love, love these fruity prints. They get me very excited for next summer, even though we are already in autumn here. And actually, autumn was my favourite season. Just creating this was getting me excited about the seasons ahead. This is about the moment when I realised that there isn't really enough space for the summer tab. And so I decide, okay, should I make a new tab? Should I try and make it smaller? Which is ultimately what I do, but not without sort of fiddling around with the original tab for a while and ultimately deciding, no, I'm going to have to make a new one. And to stop it being too repetitive on camera, I did take the liberty of making the other summer tab, which is still a little bit obscured. You can still see there that the S is not visible, and it just drives me slightly mad that I didn't measure that correctly. But I did do that off camera. I just didn't want it to get too repetitive. You know, I stamped winter, spring and summer off camera anyway, so that you weren't sort of seeing repetitive things go on in the video too much. And so I made the new tab off camera, but it was exactly the same way that I made that first autumn tab. Nothing different, except I tried to make it a little smaller. It still wasn't small enough. It still didn't fit in the space. Turns out that summer is the length of word it is, and no matter how much you cut the card down, it can only squeeze into a certain amount of space. So there you go. But I don't think it looks bad. I think actually, you know, it's really quite sweet that I made that mistake, because it's a little reminder whenever I look at the book that next time I do something like that, next time I'm making tabs, I need to be a bit more careful with my measurements. I then just started going through the divider pages, adding labels that again I just printed off camera because I just did not want this to be too repetitive in terms of what I was doing. And arguably I don't need a label on the page and on the side of the page, but you know what, I just liked it. And one thing that I really loved about this project was I got to use these letter stamps, which I haven't used before, and I love them. They're kind of typewriter style, and they were very cheap from a shop in the UK called The Works. And it just goes to show sometimes you can spend a significant amount of money on some craft supplies, and when you use them you think, well, they were okay. I don't know if they were worth the money. I mean, to be honest with you, I never really spend a lot on these things because I haven't really got the money. But say you do splash out on something, sometimes you can find, you know, those pens or whatever it is that you thought you would try out, they don't actually work that well, or they're not actually that impressive. The experience can be a bit underwhelming. And yet sometimes the things that you buy that are cheap, that you think, oh, it's probably not going to be amazing, but it'll do the job, end up being some of the best things in your stash that you use over and over and over again. It's what we call sod's law in the UK. Maybe you have a term for it in your country. So I am just repeating what I did with the front cover with the back cover, in that I'm gluing down this beautiful print of a flower, and I'm then going around with some craft papers and just creating a border. And I really loved how those craft papers made such a really beautiful border, just really, really gorgeous. And to me, it's one of the things that makes it look kind of unique and scrapbook-like, are those kind of scrap pages around the edges. Other than that, it was just a matter of gluing in another print on the inside after creating a border on the inside too. And then I'll show you the finished result, which I was really, really pleased with. I wonder if any of you will try and make one of your own of these seasonal scrapbooks. I think it's going to be invaluable to me for putting all my seasonal ephemera somewhere rather than holding on to it and hoarding it. It's because I think it's so pretty, but at the end of the day, I did buy it to use it. and it's not going anywhere just because I use it. It's sitting in my book. So it just makes no sense to have it sitting in a drawer or sitting in a tray somewhere when it could be, actually fulfilling its destiny and being used in a project. I really hope that this video has been helpful to you. If it has been helpful or entertaining, if you've really relished hearing about how naughty I am with my hoarding and how I just simply couldn't stand it anymore and had to create a space in order to use my ephemera, if you hard relate to that, maybe you want to leave me a comment below. If you're not already subscribed, then I would really appreciate you subscribing. Now, one thing I'll say about this in closing is that some people may think, well, what's the point of this? You could just buy something that looks similar to that rather than spend all that time altering a notebook. I mean, was it really worth it? So what I will say about that, and to those people, is that to me it was worth it because I enjoyed it. You obviously could buy something probably cheaper, although this book did come to me for free. So maybe not cheaper than free, but you probably could buy something cheap and it wouldn't cost you any time at all, would it? You could just press a button on Amazon and your book would be with you. But I had so much fun making this, and I really hope you had fun watching me make this, because I think it's a really sweet, unique project. And more importantly than anything else, when I look at it, I know it really reflects me and the lovely ephemera that I've got in my stash. And it's unique. It's the only one. I made it, and that's special to me. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. There'll be another one along soon. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.